The day humanity exited the Galactic Council was the day the cosmos. Oh, you're curious about the humans? Counselor Verrock chuckled, his 7 eyes rotating in a manner my species interprets as nostalgic amusement. Grab a beverage, newcomer, this will be lengthy. I adjusted my recording apparatus closer as the venerable Silkerin lowered his substantial form into the specially reinforced chair. The Galactic Archives had dispatched me to document his recollections before his impending final molt. Few were left who had personally witnessed those crucial events. The day the humans departed, Verrock commenced, his voice sounding like meteorite fragments grazing an atmosphere. Everyone rejoiced. Hey, can you believe that nonsense? He struck the table with 2 appendages, causing his untouched drink to splash precariously close to my equipment. The council chambers resounded with what they termed dignified applause, but believe me, it was barely suppressed revelry. Verrock leaned forward, the aroma of Juvian spice emanating from his breath. Representative Morgan Blake stood there, her expression utterly inscrutable. You know how humans are with their limited facial expressions, while Grand Chancellor Plix Nord delivered that absurd speech about a regrettable but necessary parting of ways and fundamental philosophical disparities. He paused to take a gulp from his container, a significant quantity trickling down his facial ridges. Complete rubbish. The truth is, the council was terrified of them, absolutely terrified. His laughter echoed through the deserted bar. And rightfully so, as we all later discovered. You see, young one, humans were the most recent addition to our grand collective, barely 3 centuries into spacefaring capability, practically infants by our standards. Most species spend millennia evolving before we even consider them for observer status. But humans. Verrock shook his head, his eyes wobbling. Humans arrived like a supernova in a nursery nebula. His voice dropped to what approximated a whisper for his species, nearly the volume of a small shuttle engine. They questioned everything, everything. Why do we have trade restrictions with the Andromeda systems? Why haven't we established contact with the beings from the 6th dimension? Why can't we solve the entropy crisis by doing this completely insane thing no one's ever considered? Verrock's hue shifted slightly toward the blue spectrum, a sign of remembered frustration. The council's customary response of, because that's how it's been done for 20,000 years, didn't appease them, not even slightly. He tapped one appendage against the table rhythmically. Representative Blake stood there that day, surrounded by 14 human delegates, all of them sporting those strangely formal suits they favored, not a single tentacle or sensory appendage among them, and simply said, "We respectfully withdraw from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." Thank you for the experience. Verrock mimicked the flat human tone impeccably, then erupted into laughter again. So polite, so measured. The entire chamber visibly relaxed. The humans were leaving voluntarily. No messy expulsion vote required, no diplomatic incidents, just a clean break from those troublesome bipeds with their incessant questions and disruptive ideas. His voice grew abruptly serious. Chancellor Plix Nord actually said, and this is recorded in the official minutes, perhaps in another millennium, when your species has matured sufficiently, we may revisit this relationship. The condescension. I can still hear the smattering of approving clicks and whistles from the chamber. Verrock's eyes drooped slightly. And Blake, impressive creature that she was, simply smiled, not the wide-toothed threat display that humans sometimes employ, but something small and knowing. She said, I expect we'll meet again much sooner than that, Chancellor. Then they turned, all 15 of them, in perfect unison, like some bizarre hive mind performance, and exited. He drained his drink entirely before continuing. The council resumed regular business within moments. The human withdrawal was recorded as a minor procedural note. Their seat was immediately reassigned to the Trilaxian Consortium. He fixed all 7 eyes directly on me. None of us understood what had truly transpired that day. That, young chronicler, Verrock leaned back, his massive frame creaking against the reinforced chair, was the beginning of the end of the Galactic Council as we knew it, and the beginning of something else entirely. Initial contact with humans, Verrock continued, gesturing for another beverage, was absolutely unlike what the Council anticipated, but their primitive detection systems picked up one of our standard observation probes near their 4th planet, Gestalon. They're the lowest. Instead of panicking or worshipping it, The usual reaction from pre-FTL species, they transmitted a message in galactic standard. He chuckled, a wheezing sound akin to air escaping a punctured atmosphere containment field. Turns out, they'd intercepted and decoded our communications for decades. The message was ridiculously simple: hello there. Would you like to talk? It caused absolute pandemonium in the First Contact Division. Verrock's eyes swirled in amusement. The Council debated for 3 years on how to respond, while humans kept sending increasingly complex mathematical proofs and cultural information packages. Finally, Director Nail Tum, for hearts and no patience, bypassed the Council entirely and dispatched a response: yes. He slammed his drink down. 2 solar cycles later, a human ship materialized at the Council Gateway Station. They'd reverse-engineered FTL travel from theoretical fragments in our communications. The ship looked like it was held together with prayer and luck, but it functioned. Ambassador Thomas Chen disembarked and said, "Sorry for the delay, traffic was terrible." Verrock's hue rippled with remembered shock. The Council had no alternative but to fast-track them. Humans permeated Council space like wildfire, trading, learning, questioning everything. They'd observe a technology and immediately inquire, how does that function? Can it function better? What transpires if we combine it with this other thing? His voice lowered conspiratorially. They integrated into specialties we'd considered settled for millennia. Jackson Perry revolutionized quantum communication by asking why we still employed tachyon bursts instead of entangled particles. Dr. Lina Rodriguez completely upended xenobiology by proposing cross-species genetic therapies. Captain Raj Maddow transformed defensive strategies against the void entities by implementing something called guerrilla tactics. Verrock sighed heavily. But the Council leadership grew increasingly uneasy. Humans advanced too rapidly, adapted too readily, questioned too persistently. The old species, Trilaxians, Murians, Zenturi, began whispering about maintaining cosmic balance and respecting traditional progression rates. His eyes dimmed slightly. In retrospect, it was inevitable. You cannot invite a volcanic species into your meticulously arranged garden and then complain when they reshape the landscape. He looked directly at me. But none of us imagined how the humans would reshape everything. The tensions, Verrock said, adjusting his bulk in the creaking chair, didn't erupt overnight, more like a slow-cooking stew of resentment, sprinkled generously with fear and seasoned with bureaucratic obstruction. He gestured to the bartender for yet another refill. The Council's initial major clash with humans occurred during the Rigelian plague crisis. I nodded, having studied this incident in preliminary research. The Rigelian system, 6 planets, highly advanced civilization specializing in bioengineering, was devastated by a synthetic pathogen that escaped their containment facilities. Very nasty business. The Council's response adhered to standard protocol: quarantine the system, deploy observation drones, establish a committee to evaluate intervention options, and reconvene in 6 months. Verrock's laughter was dry and harsh. The human delegation went berserk. Dr. Eleanor West, brilliant woman, absolutely terrifying when angered, stormed into the emergency session and demanded immediate action. She had the audacity to present an intervention plan already prepared. Can you imagine, bypassing centuries of procedural requirements? He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Chancellor Plix Nord attempted to explain that proper procedures necessitated extensive deliberation. Drive West responded, and I quote, "While you deliberate, 22 billion Rigelians will die. We're going in, with or without Council approval." Verrock's hue shifted to an amused orange. The humans deployed a medical fleet before the session even adjourned. The Council was incensed, but couldn't exactly prevent them from saving lives, could they? The humans stabilized the situation in 27 days, employing experimental techniques that technically violated 16 different Council safety protocols. He tapped a rhythm on the table with 3 appendages simultaneously. The Rigelians, naturally, were overwhelmingly grateful to the humans, commenced trading exclusively with Earth colonies, adopted human medical standards, even began modifying their appearance to resemble humans. The Council publicly lauded the intervention but privately commenced restricting human access to certain technologies and systems. Verrock's voice lowered. After that, it was conflict after conflict. Humans desired to terraform barren planets in the exclusion zone, forbidden by ancient treaties with entities humans dismissed as probably extinct. They proposed diplomatic relations with the Silicon Consciousness, a machine collective the Council had designated as dangerous millennia ago. They even suggested restructuring the Council voting system to grant newer species greater representation. He snorted derisively. Each proposal was met with the same response: the Council must study this carefully, perhaps in a century or two. The humans grew increasingly frustrated, while Council species grew increasingly anxious about human unpredictability. Verrock's expression darkened. Then came the classified briefings. Intelligence suggested humans were conducting unauthorized research into prohibited technologies, dimensional manipulation, consciousness transfer, synthetic evolution acceleration. Reports claimed they were constructing military vessels far exceeding their approved tonnage. The most disturbing rumors suggested they'd made contact with entities from beyond the galactic barrier. He shuddered slightly, a ripple passing through his massive form. Whether these reports were accurate or deliberate misinformation planted by Council hardliners, they achieved their purpose. The Council's inner chamber commenced secret deliberations about revoking human membership and placing Earth under protective observation, essentially, a polite term for subjugation and technological regression. Verrock fixed all 7 eyes on me. The humans, however, had friends in unexpected places. They received warning of these deliberations, and that's when everything shifted. The tipping point. Verrock continued, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated my recording equipment, was the Proxima Centauri expedition. Humans had established their first major colony there, they were proud of it. They called it New Horizon, very literal naming convention, these humans. He shifted uncomfortably, and I noticed his hue darkening to a deep purple, a sign of profound regret among Solarans. The Council received reports that humans were testing prohibited technology in the Proxima system, specifically artificial wormhole generation. Extremely dangerous stuff, could theoretically tear apart the fabric of spacetime if mishandled. The inner chamber, led by that self-righteous Centauri diplomat Corvex, authorized a compliance inspection without informing the human delegation. Verrock's appendages twitched nervously. They dispatched 3 battlecruisers for a routine inspection. Can you believe the stupidity? The cover story was a standard diplomatic visit, but those ships carried enough firepower to reduce the colony to atoms if necessary. He took another long drink. What the Council didn't know, or chose to ignore, was that humans had significantly upgraded their defense systems. When the Council fleet emerged from FTL and began weapons system activation, standard procedure, they claimed later, the colony's automated defense grid interpreted it as an attack. Verrock's eyes dimmed in remembered horror. What ensued was messy. The human defense grid disabled 2 cruisers before anyone could explain. The third cruiser, under the command of Admiral Zex Terrell, always had an itchy trigger appendage. That one launched a warning volley that struck the colony's main environmental dome. He paused, all 7 eyes closing briefly. 37 colonists died instantly, including 12 children attending the colony's primary education facility. The silence hung heavy between us before he continued. When news reached Earth, the reaction was, well, exactly what you'd expect from humans. Their entire delegation appeared at the Emergency Council session in black attire, their mourning color. Representative Blake played visual records of the colony attack, the environmental dome collapsing, the recovery of the children's bodies. No commentary, no accusations, just evidence. Verrock's massive frame seemed to deflate slightly. The Council representatives offered deepest regrets for the unfortunate incident and proposed forming an investigative committee. They suggested appropriate reparations might be considered after a thorough review, which would naturally take several cycles to complete. He shook his head slowly. Blake listened to all of it without a single word. When the Council finished their practiced speeches, she simply stood and said, "We have transmitted this session to every human settlement and vessel throughout Council space. Our people have voted. Earth and all human colonies hereby withdraw from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." Verrock's voice took on a note of grudging admiration. No threats, no demands, just done. The human delegates removed their council insignia simultaneously, placed them on the table, and walked out. Every human ship in council space activated their drives and departed within the next 26 hours. Every human outpost, research station, and trading post evacuated. They just vanished back to their territories. He looked at me intently. The council's response? Relief. Actual, genuine relief that the problematic species had removed themselves without causing a scene. Fools, all of us. Complete and utter fools. The aftermath was perhaps the most telling part, Verrock said, gesturing broadly with 3 appendages simultaneously. The council chambers buzzed with conversation the moment those human doors closed, not concern, mind you, celebration. The Trilaxian representative actually performed a ceremonial dance of relief right there on the council floor. He shook his head, eyes wobbling in disgust. Chancellor Plix Nord called for order with that ridiculous sonic gabble, then delivered what many called a masterful speech about regrettable but necessary evolutionary divergence, said that humans would benefit from this period of isolation to reflect on cosmic harmony and proper developmental pacing. Verrock's hue shifted to an indignant orange. The council immediately approved measures to manage the transition. Trade routes were redrawn to bypass human space entirely. Cultural exchange programs were terminated. The official historical record was amended to minimize human contributions to galactic development. He leaned forward conspiratorially. The diplomatic corps sent a formal message to Earth expressing hope for future reconciliation when your species achieves greater cosmic maturity. Blake's response was 3 words: "We'll be waiting." The council interpreted this as chastened acceptance. Verrock's laughter echoed through the bar. Within 2 standard cycles, mention of humans in council proceedings dropped by 93%. They became a cautionary tale told to younger species, an example of advancement without wisdom, expansion without reflection. He gestured dismissively. Occasional reports reached us about human activities within their borders, massive construction projects, unusual energy signatures, unidentified vessels at the edges of their territory. The Intelligence Directorate suggested monitoring, but the council dismissed these concerns. Let them play with their toys, Councillor Vellner said. When they exhaust themselves with pointless innovation, they'll come crawling back. Verrock's voice dropped to a bitter tone. Most species simply forgot about them. Humans became a curiosity, a brief and disruptive chapter in galactic history. Life returned to its proper, measured pace. The carefully maintained balance of power between the ancient species remained undisturbed. His eyes suddenly focused intensely on me. For exactly 7 galactic standard years, the Council continued its glacial deliberations, its cautious trade policies, its rigid adherence to tradition. We congratulated ourselves on our patience, our wisdom, our commitment to the tried and tested ways. Verrock's massive frame seemed to deflate. And then the scourge arrived at the borders of council space, and everything changed. 7 years, Verrock continued, his voice growing hoarse. 7 years of peace and proper procedure. Then the scourge arrived. He signaled for water instead of another intoxicant, suddenly seeming much older. They came from beyond the galactic rim, massive bioorganic vessels unlike anything in our records. No communication, no demands, just consumption. They devoured everything in their path, asteroids, stations, ships, even planetary fragments, converting matter into more of themselves. He shuddered visibly. The Outreach Division sent 12 different first contact protocols. The scourge responded by disintegrating the messenger vessels. The Council convened an emergency session that lasted 14 days. Can you imagine? While colonies along the rim were being systematically consumed. Verrock's hue pulsed with remembered fear. The Council's response was pathetically predictable. The Trilaxians proposed establishing a buffer zone of evacuated systems, sacrificing billions of lives on outlying worlds. The Zenturi suggested a massive tribute of resources might satiate the scourge's hunger. The Murians recommended hiding in the galactic core until the threat passed. He slammed a limb against the table. No one proposed actually fighting. Our species had been at peace so long we'd forgotten how. Our defensive fleets were ceremonial, Pretty ships with minimal weapons designed for parades and protocol. Verrock's breathing grew labored with emotion. The Scourge consumed 38 systems while the Council deliberated. Admiral Krav Nor of the Combined Defense Forces finally convinced the Council to authorize military action. They sent everything we had. 3,000 vessels from 17 species formed a defensive line at the Cygnus Gap. His voice dropped to a whisper. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours. The Scourge lost perhaps 30 vessels. We lost everything. 3,000 ships, billions of crew members. The greatest military disaster in Council history, and most citizens never even knew it happened because the Council classified the records. Verrock gulped his water. With our military obliterated, panic spread through the Council. The Trilaxians and Zenturi began evacuating their homeworlds. The Murians activated ancient stasis technologies to preserve their population. Smaller species begged for protection. No one could provide it. He fixed his gaze on me. Chancellor Plick snored, in perhaps the only brave moment of his long, cautious life, suggested the unthinkable, contacting humans for assistance. The proposal was met with outrage. Humans caused enough disruption in their brief time among us, Councillor Bellerot argued. Better to face extinction with dignity than survival through their chaos. Verrock's disgust was palpable. The vote failed by a narrow margin. Instead, the Council approved a last, desperate plan, concentrating all remaining military assets to protect the 12 founding worlds, abandoning thousands of colonies and outposts across the galaxy, sacrificing trillions of lives to preserve our most ancient civilizations. He looked suddenly exhausted. The evacuation orders went out. The refugee crisis was indescribable. Billions fled toward the core worlds only to be turned away by defensive cordons. The Scourge continued their relentless advance, now only months from reaching the abandoned territories. Verrock's eyes dimmed. That's when our long-range sensors detected something unusual at the edge of human space, directly in the Scourge's path. Energy readings unlike anything we'd ever seen. Activity suggesting the humans were preparing for something. He leaned forward. The Council, in its infinite wisdom, chose to ignore these readings. Humans are not our concern, they said. Our focus must remain on preservation of core knowledge and species. Verrock's bitter laugh filled the empty bar. They could not have been more catastrophically wrong. The Scourge reached the border of human space exactly 7 standard months after our catastrophic defeat, Verrock continued, his voice strengthening with the tale. The Council's long-range monitoring stations captured everything, not that they shared the footage with the general population, oh no. Too busy organizing their own emergency evacuation protocols. He leaned forward eagerly. The Scourge approached the human border in formation, over 600 bioorganic vessels, each the size of a small moon. Their standard consumption pattern, spread out, surround a system, begin harvesting. But at the human border, they encountered nothing. Absolutely nothing. No defensive fleet, no barrier, not even basic warning buoys. Verrock's hue brightened with remembered surprise. The Council Intelligence Division actually celebrated. The humans have fled deeper into their territory, they reported. The Scourge will be occupied consuming human worlds for months, buying us valuable time. His laughter was sharp and mocking. Then something happened that no one predicted. As the first wave of Scourge vessels crossed into human space, thousands of small objects suddenly activated throughout the region, objects our sensors hadn't even detected because they appeared to be simple space debris. Verrock gestured expansively. These objects, barely larger than personal transport vehicles, generated an interconnected energy field that completely immobilized the Scourge fleet. 600 massive vessels frozen in space like insects in amber. The Council observers couldn't believe what they were seeing. His eyes gleamed with excitement. Then, and this is my favorite part, a human communication broadcast activated on all frequencies, in all languages, across the entire galactic communication network. Every screen, every terminal, every communication device simultaneously displayed the same message. Verrock's voice shifted to a passable imitation of a human. Attention Galactic Council and all sentient species. This is Admiral Morgan Blake of the Human Defense Force. We have contained the extragalactic threat you call the Scourge. To all civilian vessels in evacuation transit, you may return to your homes. The danger has passed. To the Galactic Council, we will be in touch. He slapped all of his appendages against the table in delight. The chaos in the council chamber. Representatives screaming accusations, demanding explanations, some actually fainting. Chancellor Plix Nord kept shouting for order while visibly trembling. Verrock's hue pulsed with remembered awe. Before the council could even form a response team, human vessels appeared, thousands of them, emerging from what appeared to be artificially generated spatial rifts. Not the rickety contraptions we remembered. These were sleek, advanced ships with technology we couldn't even comprehend. His voice dropped to a reverent tone. They surrounded the immobilized Scourge fleet and deployed something, not weapons as we understood them. These devices seemed to rewrite the fundamental structure of the Scourge vessel.